Today is Sunday, March 10th, and this is Celtics Beat on the CLNS Media Network, the leading online provider of audio-video coverage of the Boston Celtics. I'm Adam Kaufman. Episode 305, featuring new CLNS Celtics writer Scott Souza, is brought to you by Robinhood. Robinhood's giving listeners of the Celtics Beat podcast a free stock like Apple, Ford, or Sprint to help you build your portfolio. Sign up at Celtics.Robinhood.com. Show's also brought to you by Mint Mobile. Get your new wireless plan and a new SIM card shipped to you for free for just $15 at mintmobile.com/podcast. We're also brought to you by The Athletic. Get 40% off your monthly subscription just by going to theathletic.com/CelticsBeat. Welcome in. Another new edition of Celtics Beat. Great to have you here. Celtics are out west. Things going well, obviously, for the most part. Certainly a very good beginning. And I want to dive in because we've got a whole lot to cover. And I'm very excited to bring on this particular guest as well because it's good for all of us. Let me explain. Scott Souza, veteran NBA reporter, new member of the CLNS team as well, recently joined our already extraordinary group of Celtics contributors. Scott, welcome not only to this show but to the team.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me on Celtics Beat for kind of the relaunch, so to speak, of Scott Souza with the Celtics. So I appreciate it. I appreciate all the times you had me on. I was with the old place for all those years. I believe I was the first Celtics at 7 a.m.
You were. Yeah.
Many years ago, so it's good to be able to continue this. I appreciate it.
I've talked about this too, just in general. When you're good, you're not looking long, and that was certainly the case for you. Only a month away from the Celtics Beat, you're back where you've been the last 14 years. That's our pleasure, I assure you. So, what can fans look forward to from you at CLNS?
Well, I'm going to be what I'm going to be doing. Obviously, a lot of people I think know CLNS. They probably see a lot of content more than they've seen kind of the name CLNS, if that makes sense.
Sure.
You see the podcast everybody knows about, Celtics Beat, and some of the other podcasts that go on, Jeff Goodman, the thing that John Duke and Justin Poulin have done for years and years and years, going all the way back to, back to the Ryan Gomes era of the Boston Celtics, Sebastian Telfair era going back to the Celtics. And I think they see a lot of the clips that they locate on YouTube. In the past, haven't had a ton of written content, so we talked about trying to bring some of that in. Some columns, some perspective stuff. A good thing for me is I'm no longer behind a paywall, which I'm very excited about. And I'm also no longer fighting print newspaper deadlines from a archaic era where you got to file things at 8:15 and 9:45 and going to leave the locker room, 30 seconds after guys start speaking because you got to hit a 10:45 deadline during a playoff game. So this will give me a chance to do a little bit more free writing, a little bit more columns, analysis, perspective, maybe have a little more fun with different topics. And I posted the first topic. The first column came out last Sunday before the Houston game. Explained a little bit more about why I'm at CLNS, if people want to look that up. And I was impressed with the response. I didn't expect during this whole thing that a lot of people would notice, and that I would get some of the responses that I have, both from followers on Twitter and also a lot of people in the business. And when you go through some changes, some of those responses, even if you don't explicitly say it to people, they mean a lot. You notice them, and I appreciate the fact that, like a bad penny, you guys haven't quite lost me yet.
Well, hell, you even had Marcus Smart tweeting at you.
Yeah, that was kind of nice as well. And a few people from the Celtics reached out, and again, a lot of people from the media. So whether I got back to everybody or not, whether that even be again, people listening to this who said something or liked a tweet on Twitter. I might not have gotten back to everybody, but I did notice everything and noticed all the names that were associated with the likes and the retweets and the comments and stuff. So, again, much appreciated from everybody, and it's nice to know that I was missed a little bit for a short period of time at least.
Well, I do hope that in addition to no longer being behind a paywall, you won't only be behind your keyboard also, because, now that you've got more time at your disposal, we can get you out on the floor and get you in the Garden Report videos after games.
Well, I always said that I have a face for radio. I think maybe the more current thing might be I have a face for podcasts.
Yeah, there you go.
I think there will be a little bit more of that, so I think that's part of the deal. So that'll be interesting. We'll have to actually iron the shirts from now on before we head over to the Garden, as opposed to just reach into the dryer and throw something on at 3:45 before we head out the door.
All right, well, Scott, as we chat right now, let's talk about this team, which, as we go, this is before our conversations before the Lakers game against that lousy team they shouldn't have lost to the last month. LeBron's minutes limited. C's should win this game. Obviously, we can't talk about a game that in our reality has not happened yet, even though I know the show releases right after it's taken place. But Celtics have won 3 of 4. I felt like there was a whole lot of inception in there. It was weird. But more specifically, first 2 games of this road trip that finishes in L.A., Lakers and Clippers. Now, that included the wire-to-wire blowout of the Warriors, Gordon Hayward's big game in that one, the 30 points, but also his winning jumper in Sacramento. So, yeah, as Kyrie Irving talked about, long plane ride seemed to help. Everyone is asking what has been asked a half dozen times already this year, really, which is, has Boston turned a corner? Is that the question we should be asking right now, though?
I think it's fair because, and I wrote something that, was posted or should be posted at this point on Friday about, I think it's fair to buy in because you've been wanting to buy in on this team for so long. And, as a fan, as not only, and I put this in the column too, not only as a fan, you're not being a green teamer if you say they won 2 games, now I'm back all in, because everybody's been on the verge of being all in on this team all year, whether it's the media, whether it's the fans, the players want to be on the verge of being all in. Danny Ainge didn't make any trades at the trade deadline because he still thinks the potential for this team as it stands was better than it would have been had he made, and they weren't talked about a lot in trades around the trade deadline, that Celtics weren't a hot-button team, but, apparently anything that came across his desk, he said, no, I'm fine. I'm not going to go into the buyout market, which I was a little bit surprised that they didn't do something to shake things up a little bit, and, they had the open roster spot when they were able to move Jabari Bird's contract, so they had that, and they either passed or were unsuccessful in bringing in a number of guys on the buyout market that might have helped, Paul Gasol or Markieff Morris or a number of those guys. They pretty much stayed the course the entire time, saying our best chance to make a long run here in the playoffs, to get to the finals and to compete for a championship was with these 14 guys and with this 9 or 10 man rotation. So when you see signs of it, like what happened in Golden State this past week, like what happened in Sacramento when Kyrie didn't play and Gordon Hayward was able to make that last shot, I think it's fair to buy in because you're not just doing it as a fan, you're doing it as somebody who said, this is the team that I thought we were getting when training camp began in September.
All right, but let me devil's advocate you just a little bit. Is it possible that
was going to happen?
Well, just for fun, is it possible that Ainge, he could have felt exactly as you outlined, or the flip side of that is he said, I don't know what our ceiling is this year. Maybe it's really good. Maybe we never figure it out. But what I do know is I'm not going to give up anything at the trade deadline in terms of capital and assets that I might need this summer in an effort to go out and acquire a guy like Anthony Davis or whomever may be available.
Yeah, I mean, that's true, too. So I think some of the uncertainty, lent into that. I mean, if you are 100% certain that Kyrie Irving's going to be here for the next 5 years, do you entertain the idea of maybe, especially at that point in time when Terry Rozier was really struggling, like maybe this is a time where we can get something for that asset, a guy who's going to be a restricted free agent at the end of the year. So with complete certainty, maybe he would have been able to move forward a little bit more, and some of the uncertainty surrounding what this team's going to be looking at in the summer, both in terms of what guys are going to want to come back here, what guys they can bring back here, and what trades they are able to make. I think that's fair to say that he may have looked at it and said, okay, let's ride with this, and then we're going to kind of reshuffle the deck, leading into July 1st after all. But, there were situations, I think, too, that with some of their picks and some of their picks that have value because they're potential first-round picks, but maybe not a ton of value, maybe not as much value as some of the other ones. Obviously, the Memphis pick is kind of the big one now because that's going to be likely unprotected moving forward. But some of the other picks they have, even their own picks, could they have moved that to get a little bit better? Could they have shuffled the chemistry on this team to maybe make a longer run? I still think that those things were probably in play and those things were probably discussed and put aside, saying that, we're going to ride with this bunch for now. And then at the end of the year, we find out what Kyrie Irving's going to do, and we find out, if there's any chance to bring Marcus Morris back, and if, Terry Rozier is interested in coming back here for a year and trying unrestricted free agency next year, kind of going, that route, then we'll deal with that then. But for now, this gives us the best chance to go furthest in the playoffs. And, this week you saw why a lot of people felt that way.
Well, everyone seems to be feeling pretty good, especially after, again, the first couple of wins on the trip. Brad Stevens weighed in on the recent success after that win in Sacramento.
Every team has to find a togetherness in competing, and some teams it takes 60 games, some teams it takes 20 games, and bad teams never get there, right? And you hope that it took us 60 games, but we'll see. We haven't proven ourselves to be great at that yet for a long stretch of time.
I like that the coach is not fully buying in, that he doesn't know because he recognizes, Scott, that, hey, we've been here. Everyone's talking about the good vibes surrounding this group, and I get that, and they should be. Feel good with what you're accomplishing. But I do wonder, too, are they genuinely good vibes, or do they coincide with winning because winning is fun? Because we're not that far away from Shemi Ojale saying everyone had to wake the bleep up, and Marcus Morris saying they're not having fun, and Jaylen Brown calling the losing toxic, Kyrie Irving questioning everything under the sun, and on and on.
Yeah, and that's a big question. And this team, and that's kind of what the gist of the column that was posted on CLNS on Friday was about, that, we have been here before. And that's why I think there is some hesitancy. Why ultimately I think it's fine if you did decide to buy in the last couple of games, and you probably did, and you stayed up until, 1 o'clock in the morning, and probably after the Golden State game, you watched all the post-game stuff, and then, it's 2:15 and you're like, oh, I got to get up for work in 3 hours, but this was a lot of fun. This was worth it. This was what I was waiting for. But we have been here before. There's been stretches during the season where, even when, Al Horford would talk about, he really likes our group now, and Marcus Smart would talk about how, everything's coming together, and Morris would talk about how things were fun, and Kyrie Irving, even when it didn't always seem like he was having fun, he would always kind of throw in that caveat at the end saying, but I'm having a lot of fun with this. It's a challenge, but I'm having a lot of fun. And then I think the most difficult thing about this team, both covering it through the season and watching it being a little bit away for a couple of weeks, and obviously as a fan following it, is that they will look good for stretches, and then they don't seem to handle that adversity well. They have one loss, and then suddenly the sky is falling, and they're having these 40-minute team meetings and these, 2-day summits at the Auerbach Center where the lounge there turns into the library at the Breakfast Club, where they're all bearing their souls, and they have this team flight where they all have to come together, and nobody, all the negative stuff comes out, and it's like, well, you just lost a game. It's like, why does one or two misstep have such an effect on this team so dramatically? I think that's been a little bit of the surprising thing about this team is, when you do have a bad quarter, they're not always able to get to bounce back from it and rebound it and again, handle that adversity the way we've seen some of these Brad Stevens teams do in the past, and just kind of get over it. Maybe, okay, we did have a bad game, and maybe things didn't go right. Maybe Jaylen Brown didn't switch on the right transition, and maybe Gordon Hayward should have passed the ball to Al Horford, to Kyrie Irving, instead of trying to get it to Jason Tatum in the corner. But it's a play. Get over it. We lost the game tonight. We're in position to win, and we're going to come back and get them tomorrow. Those setbacks, and some of them are biggies. I mean, the Clippers game was certainly a bombshell of a blown lead there. But the way the sky is falling every time they lose a game or two, I think has been the most head-scratching part of this team for a lot of this season.
Well, especially from a head coach that has always preached the even keel, don't get too high, don't get too low. The guy that doesn't react to a game-winning shot on the court will stand there with his arms crossed and that full just deadpan expression on his face. Quick break to tell you today's show is brought to you by Robinhood. Robinhood is an investing app that lets you buy and sell stocks, ETFs, options, cryptos, all commission-free. While other brokerages charge up to $10 for every trade, Robinhood doesn't charge any commission fees, so you can trade stocks and keep all your profits. Plus, there's no account minimum deposit needed to get started, so you can just start investing at any level. The simple, intuitive design of Robinhood makes investing easy for newcomers and experts alike. View easy-to-understand charts and market data and place a trade in just 4 taps on your smartphone. It's really that easy. You can also view stock collections, such as the 100 most popular. With Robinhood, you can learn how to invest in the market as you build your portfolio. Discover new stocks, track your favorite companies, get custom notifications for price movements, so you never miss the right moment to invest. Robinhood is giving listeners of Celtics Beat, this podcast, a free stock like Apple, Ford, or Sprint to help you build your portfolio. Sign up at Celtics.Robinhood.com. All right, back to the show. In some ways, It's almost been frustrating watching the Celtics when they play well, like the Golden State game, only because it does remind all of us of the potential and how they haven't played most of the year and just how high the ceiling is. The ceiling has always been high. It continues to be high if all goes well and they're all united and focused, and at the moment they are, and they're motivated and having fun. Brad Stevens even joked about that being kind of the buzzword because of obviously Marcus Morris's earlier comments. What does it take to do it consistently? We keep hearing about the need for consistency. What does it take to do it consistently?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I mean, obviously that togetherness is something that's kind of an abstract idea, but I've never really gotten the sense, and when I was there, that it was I never got a sense that guys weren't getting along in the locker room. You just didn't have that. You didn't have that vibe of ultimate camaraderie, I guess, going along in the locker room. But you never got the sense that guys were staying away from each other and guys didn't want to be with each other. Guys were cordial. Guys were around each other. Guys would talk. It wasn't a silent locker room. It wasn't an overly joyous one. But, guys were – it just seemed like on the court sometimes there was that disconnect about what everybody's role was supposed to be. And I think more and more you've had guys have kind of accepted it in different times. And then guys have gone through some hot streaks and colder streaks at different times. I mean, at the beginning of the year, Marcus Morris was playing really well. He hasn't been playing well as yet. So then you got to adjust to that. Gordon Hayward, as we all know, has been kind of back and forth in terms of his confidence level. I think a guy who I think has really taken a tough rap this year has been, and undeserved in a lot of ways, is Jaylen Brown. I mean, he had a hand injury at the beginning of the year, got off to a tough start this year, did have a little bit of an adjustment period. I mean, this was a guy who was putting in 30 points on different nights for you in the playoffs, going shot to shot for LeBron James. And now suddenly, he's being told to be a defensive player and he's only taking certain shots a game. And then his hand was injured and he goes to the bench and he's got to kind of adjust to a bench role. And I think if you look at some of his defensive metrics over the last couple of months, and even a lot of his offensive game, I think he's adjusted and has played very well. And for some reason, he, and along with, Terry Rozier, I think has been more up and down and more back and forth, have been kind of the poster children, and not to call them the children of the young guys because we don't want to fall into Kyrie's trap there. But, for some of the, guys not accepting roles on these teams, I think some of those guys have accepted the roles. I think it's just everybody else has been kind of hot and cold at different times and trying to figure out during a game when's my time, when's his time. And I think once you can, have a situation like this week and hopefully get it going further, guys kind of feel more comfortable that if they do what they're supposed to do, then it will all work out for both them and for the team, and that will kind of bring everybody together. I think this team has, when they have had a little bit of success, I do think there's part of it where they kind of think that they've arrived again. Okay, this is how it was supposed to be all year. And then they're not as crisp on certain things, defensive rotations, transition defense, they'll score. And then, this happened even in the Sacramento game a couple of times the other night where they'll score, they'll rush a shot, the other team will come back with a dunk the other end, and they've let that snowball. So I think it's maintaining that level of focus and intensity when things are going well and when things are not going so well.
Someone who, you talk about hot and cold, and obviously a lot of that applies to what's gone on the floor. Someone who's been pretty hot and cold off the floor, as we know, is Kyrie Irving. We're going to talk about him for a few minutes. So if you're tired of Kyrie talk, scroll ahead in the show. That's fine. I don't care. But this is something that we should address. He's been, or was anyway, incredibly moody for a couple of weeks, often short, snippy with the media. I won't bother playing the sound of that minute where he's just asked question after question and responded with 1 or 2 word answers. But he really opened up both before and after the Warriors game about not liking being a celebrity, of course, despite chasing a movie career, but he said this.
I didn't really come into this game to be cameras in my face, be famous, be a celebrity, wherever embodies that. So it's a little hard for me. I wanted those things when I was younger, but now at this point in my career, I just want to play basketball at a very, very high level.
And, of course, his frustrations with, well, all of us.
I get tired of all this stuff, just like everybody else. So, I mean, that's I said it's a constant battle because media has just gotten just outrageous. And seeing somebody question, like, Bron's body of work, like my body of work, KD's body of work, and, the team's success falls on the best player. And whether call it fair or unfair, but nobody should ever question what type of winner those guys are. You know what I mean? What type of winner I am, or whether or not I have the team in first mentality.
In some ways, it seems like this team, Scott, just goes as Kyrie's attitude goes. Not his play, his mentality, his mood. Is that too simplistic?
It's an interesting question in terms of, Kyrie Irving is this contradiction. In one way, and you heard it just in those clips. In one way, he puts himself in a class of, I want to be the NBA superstar. I want, my team. But he doesn't want necessarily a lot of the responsibility and the pressure that goes along with that and the scrutiny that goes along with it. I mean, if you're a guy who, guys are looking for, and this goes for Kevin Durant too, with some of the antics that he's had out in Golden State, you want to be the guy that kind of everybody looks to and everybody follows, and you want to be the leader, but then you don't want to kind of answer for when things don't go as well, or, you don't feel as uncomfortable in front of the cameras, which is, again, it's weird for somebody who has a movie career and again, for somebody who, according to, and maybe Kyrie hasn't said this himself, but according to a lot of stories, is kind of wanted that in Cleveland and wanted to be out of LeBron James's shadow so, he could be more of the focal point. When you're the focal point, you're the focal point. And, when you say that, if you'll have me, I want to be back, and you film a commercial with your dad about having your number retired, and then people start thinking that you're having second guesses on that, people are going to ask you about that. It's not going to be one of those things where we'll just don't worry about it. I'll be a free agent, next year, and we'll talk about it on July 1st. Like, that's not the way the NBA works. And, I was talking to a couple of different people about this, and I do kind of understand NBA players to a certain extent. There's no other real sport where you go into the final 2 years of your contract and people wonder where you're going to re-sign in 2 years. Like, there's some of that with some marquee, players in baseball. And
we saw it with Bryce Harper. It's already a thing with Mike Trout.
A little bit, I guess, like Bryce Harper. But like this year, like Chris Sale's going to be a free agent at the end of the year. He's going to play the year out. And you have a lot of guys in the Patriots who are going to be free agents. You didn't constantly say, well, that's nice that Trey Flowers made a sack in week 2, but, what if he doesn't want to sign here long term?
Right.
This is unique to basketball, but this is the culture that they have created. This is what has come out of the, the free agency that they've enjoyed and the, some of the contracts, the way they've set them up in terms of being one-on-one contracts. They want the ability to be able to control more of their careers, and that's fine because in basketball, more than any other sport, you guys are the face, you guys are the talent, your face is out there. It's not the uniform, it's not the laundry. It is, guys that get put on TV are LeBron James and Kyrie Irving and James Harden and Kevin Durant, Steph Curry. This goes all the way back to the Magic Johnson, Larry Bird era, even though some of the rules have changed and obviously the salaries have increased. But again, with that comes the scrutiny of, are you going to re-sign in Boston 2 years from now? Why is Kevin Durant buying property in New York? And how many people, is LeBron James going to be able to get out to L.A. with him? And is he going to construct the roster to bring his people out there? That kind of goes along with it. And I think that's part of it that guys like Kyrie Irving and Kevin Durant struggle with, but I think it's also something that they have to come to grips with. I mean, with Kyrie Irving, it's kind of interesting. And everything about him is interesting and bizarre. But, we were told, go through the history of Kyrie Irving if we have a couple of minutes, but when he was first traded here, we were kind of told, like, this guy can be real difficult. And, he has that first press conference where everything's great and he's a 25-year-old evolving man and that whole thing. And, who wants to have the burden of having an entire team on his shoulders? We want to do this collectively. And I think he believes that on a certain way, but in another way, as time goes on, he does kind of want that burden on his shoulder, and he wants to be known as the guy who can play 40 minutes and score 40 points and take over a playoff game and be up there with Kevin Durant and LeBron James and Russell, whoever you want to put up there. Giannis is one of the 5 best players in the league. And as it's gone on, he's kind of gone back and forth. He was largely, pretty affable with the media, seemingly pretty easygoing. He had a couple of, things during his first year in Boston, the thing in Philly, and he kind of handled that well when he barked back at the fan.
Mm-hmm.
Over the course of time, he seemed to handle most things well until he got hurt last year, and that was a painful thing. And then at Media Day this year, I don't know if you remember that, he talks about, well, I want to come out and play happy. I had the best statistical year of my career last year, and he goes through all these stats, which are great, which, off the top of our head, we didn't even know. But he obviously knew them, so he's paying attention to them, and talks about during that he wasn't that happy, and we were all like, well, what weren't you happy about? I mean, maybe you were worried about your knee, and, there was kind of that lingering thing of he did throw the pass to Gordon Hayward, and I think he bared that a little bit. But you're wondering why, when everything was going so well, he wasn't that happy, and then he kept assuring us that he was happy throughout the first couple of months of the season. And I really think it took a turn. Again, maybe he's working his way through it now, but there were some warning signs there. He barked at the media in the locker room one day, which was kind of out of character for him. Usually there's that, for the people who don't know, there's about a half-hour open part of the locker room before the game, and, the media's hanging around. Usually only one or two guys talk, but the media has to be there in case somebody decides to talk. A lot of times it's Al Horford, or sometimes if there's pregame news about somebody. There's certain guys who don't talk. Gordon Hayward doesn't talk. Marcus Morris doesn't want to talk. Kyrie Irving doesn't talk before games, but he walks back and forth. And I'm sure to some extent it's annoying that there are people around who seem like they're not doing anything, even though they're kind of waiting for that one person. So he kind of barked at the media during one of those, and it really seemed like, to me, the thing that really turned it, he was having some trouble with the team in the Florida thing and the Brooklyn thing, but it was really, if I was going to boil it down, it wasn't necessarily the Anthony Davis rumor. It was the night that he called Bron. And he had that big night against the Toronto Raptors, scores 40 points, I think he had that night, pointed to the shirts, Boston, this is me. And then he came in with, I think, a story that he thought was going to play a lot different than it was, in terms of, Jaylen Brown was right about some of his criticism. I had to call Bron, and, talking about what a great, what it took of him as a man to be able to do this and admit that he was wrong to Bron, or LeBron, I'll call him. You can call him Bron. But then, the way that was received, I think, really jaded him in terms of, he thought that was going to be his magnanimous gesture, and wow, what a leader, and what leadership he showed by being able to do that, and he's the better man and everything else. And the way it was kind of perceived nationally, I think, really bit him. And I think that really was one of the things that kind of sent him into the tailspin of the very short answers. And I don't know how to deal with media. Everything I say to you, even when I think it sounds good, it's going to be turned around and people are going to talk about it negatively on ESPN, on Boston Sports Radio the next day. I think that's what kind of sent him into this funk, and I think it culminated with all those one-word answers after the Houston game. So it was a very, very long answer, but as is the case with Kyrie Irving, nothing is short and sweet when it comes to him, except for a couple of those post-game press conferences.
The big in Big Wireless provider stands for a lot of things: big contracts, big bills, and big fees. What Big Wireless doesn't want you to know is there's a way to cut your wireless bill down to just $15 a month. Introducing Mint Mobile, the game-changing company that's taken everything wrong with Big Wireless and made it right. Mint Mobile makes it so easy to cut your bill down to just $15 a month. You can even keep your old number along with all your existing contacts with any Mint Mobile plan. There's no more paying for unlimited data that you'll never use. And if you're not 100% satisfied, Mint Mobile has you covered with their 7-day money-back guarantee. To get your new wireless plan for just $15 a month, plus free shipping on your Mint Mobile SIM card, go to mintmobile.com/podcast. That's mintmobile.com/podcast. Cut your wireless bill to $15 a month and get free shipping on your Mint Mobile SIM card at mintmobile.com/podcast.
Yeah, except when he decides to be, to that end, and this won't be too quick either, but Charles Barkley, I don't know if you caught this, but it's gotten a little bit of play. He had some very strong words. This wasn't even about Kyrie Irving. He was asked really about Adam Silver's comments, the commissioner at the MIT Sloan Sports Analytics Conference, about the idea that NBA players today are unhappy and dealing with a lot of anxiety. And Silver, I thought, had some really interesting comments about that on this particular panel interview with Bill Simmons. And Barkley just laughed at them, really. He said that NBA players should be incredibly happy because of all the money they have, and they don't work all that much or face any real pressures the way that the everyday man, I guess. But then he took it and turned it specifically into a commentary on Kyrie Irving.
I don't know him that well. He seems like a good kid, but I've never seen a person so miserable. To have so much success, to have the world in the palm of his hand, he's going to make $40, $50 million a year for the next 10, 15 15 years. He's already won a world championship. He's in the movies, but he's got to be one of the most miserable people I've ever seen. He wanted to go to Boston because he wanted to have his own team. And what a lot of these guys don't understand is when you're a star, and I've been a star, you get all the credit, but you get all the blame. That ain't right. That ain't fair. That's just how it is. You know, nobody runs to Jaylen Brown, the Morris brothers, or Gordon Hayward. They going to come to Kyrie Irving after every game. That's the responsibility with being a great player, being a star. Like I say, we can all get on television and complain about, oh, I can't wait to get away from this. Like, dude, we're paying you $40 million a year.
So really, that's kind of a shorter version of a lot of what you just said already. So I don't want you to repeat yourself. But is that your perception of Kyrie as well, that, you know, you think back to the reports that came out of Cleveland at the end of his tenure there, that during that final playoff run, he wasn't even talking to his teammates. He was a lone wolf. He was ignoring everybody he wanted out. And then you have Kevin O'Connor in The Ringer recently writing that he was detached and disenchanted, and the only guy that he's even really friendly with at this point is Jason Tatum. Of course, the two Duke boys, and they share an agent and all of that. Is Kyrie, you know, that miserable guy that Barkley paints him out to be?
I don't know if it's miserable or not, because, again, for the most part, Kyrie Irving has been a pretty good guy to deal with. I mean, he hasn't been on the Isaiah Thomas level as being, you know, always smiley happy. But, you know, even with Isaiah, I mean, as much as I'm, you know, as big an Isaiah Thomas fan as there was around in terms of covering a guy and looking forward to him coming back. And, yes, I hope there is a tribute video. There should be a tribute video. I'm looking forward to watching the tribute video. If I weren't covering the team, I would probably still go to that game to watch the tribute video live. You know, and he probably wasn't always like that behind the scenes. I'm sure he could be difficult. I know for a fact he could be difficult behind the scenes. But, you know, so Kyrie hasn't been at that level. But he was generally a pretty good guy to deal with. It's just been kind of this recent thing about, I think he worries, and I think a lot of NBA players do this more so in other sports. They worry about the perception of what they're supposed to be beyond just playing the game. You don't have, and I know there's a big backlash to the whole shut up and dribble thing, and I know that has greater connotations for it politically, so I don't mean to draw a direct correlation there. But, you know, NBA players, in Jaylen Brown, I think, you know, has some of this with some of the stuff that he's done over at Harvard with the extension school and going to Africa and the union. A lot of these guys think of themselves globally a lot more than just being an athlete in basketball, and they don't want to be consumed to, you know, Kyrie Irving takes pride in his handle and he takes pride in his shooting, but he just doesn't want to be a point guard with a good dribble. He wants to be, you know, something greater, and he feels that he should be something greater. And I think it becomes consuming to them when they're trying to focus on, you know, as Kyrie talks about, his craft and winning a championship. But you're also, you know, you are cognizant of the fact that, you know, you have a shoe deal, which for some of these guys is worth almost, you know, the shoe contracts are worth almost as much as they're making in actual money. You know, certainly for Terry Rozier it is with you know, Puma and the way that they pushed him. And a lot of this had to do with Isaiah during that whole time too. Like, he would say things, I think, to kind of keep him in the forefront because, you know, in order to be Isaiah Thomas, you know, he kind of had to keep his name in the news and get his name on ESPN. And it seems like NBA players are a lot more conscious about that than players in other sports. You know, maybe in football you might have the quarterback that's a little bit like that, but a lot of these other sports guys just kind of go out and they do their job and they deal with the media when they have to, and they have a decent relationship with everybody. And, you know, if they get endorsements, they're happy with it. And if they do commercials, they're happy with it. But they're not thinking about their career in terms of a brand as much as some of these NBA guys are. And I think that seeps into some of their insecurities and some of their worry that I'm not making the most of this opportunity, or people tell me I should be doing this as well as and I just want to play basketball, but I also want to be this guy who's in movies and is involved in production for, you know, television shows and you know, hangs out with those types of people that have, you know, political sway and want to be known for my opinions more than just, you know, how to break down a pick and roll. I mean, Kyrie Irving told us once, you know, dealing with you guys on a day-to-day basis, talking about games is boring. This is boring to me. This isn't what I think about all the time. And then he said, no offense to you guys. But, you know, so I think that's a constant battle for a lot of these guys. And that may lead to some of the, you know, perceived or not even just perceived, but actual unhappiness that these guys have, that, you know, going out and scoring 20 points or winning a basketball game or, you know, having a good practice isn't enough for them. They're told by their outside people that they have to be a lot more than that. And some guys, I think, embrace that and move forward with it. And some guys, it's kind of a constant battle. And they're either trying to get too much attention, or they're shying away from attention, or they want attention on their own terms. And I think that's where you get those conflicts like you've had with Kyrie and with Kevin Durant and with some of the other players around the league. They want it all, but they want it all on their terms. And that's not generally how it works. As Charles Barkley said, when you're making $40 million and you're the face of a franchise.
For what it's worth, Irving said this after the Warriors game about attitude.
We all haven't been feeling too great, as of late. So, it's a choice that we all had to make with 17 or 18 games left and knowing what we're gearing up for. It's my job to show these guys what it's like to be at that type of level on a consistent basis. And, with my attitude and with my effort and being able to give confidence to these guys, it's just as important as, me, being who I'm supposed to be. So as long as my teammates are feeling good, then, we're in a good place.
So last thing about Irving before we move on to some other things, before I have to let you go, because I want to make sure we hit on some other things. But do you believe that his tone has changed for the duration at this point, that he and Brad Stevens or whomever else cleared the air on that long plane ride or wherever else they did it? Or is this just an upswing right now and moody Kyrie's going to be back at some point before the end of the year?
All I know is, wouldn't you give anything to get the hidden footage of whatever happened on that plane ride? I picture like Brad Stevens walking down the corridor of the plane with like the power of Christ compels you, just like exercising out all the negative emotions.
Well, hell, let's start rumors. Maybe that's how Gordon Hayward got his black eye. Maybe
I have no idea. Like I compared it to Oceanic Flight 815 the other day with Lost in terms of they went to another dimension and then I was thinking, well, maybe this is the happy-go-lucky team they've been the entire time, and all the moodiness is just, us being stuck on the island watching them the whole time with Jack and the dog and all that stuff. But I don't know. I think it's gonna be tested when something doesn't go right. I mean, if they go out and they beat Los Angeles on prime time, and Kyrie Irving has a big day, and then they can get revenge against the Clippers, and as long as things are going well, we're not going to know whether that's hiding. It's been when they've had that, sometimes one or two off nights in the midst of a really good stretch, all of a sudden, the stuff boils to the surface again, and you start hearing about all the unhappiness, and they don't want to answer questions, they don't want to deal with the media, and Marcus Morris said it hasn't been fun for a long time, and he walked that back the next day. But when you talk about something not being fun for a long time, you're talking about a chronic situation, not just Rajon Rondo hit a shot and we blew a big lead to the Clippers after our best player went out in the second quarter with a knee injury. You begin to paint things in these broad strokes of, you guys are having fun coming to these games and watching these games and writing about, some of these wins, but we're inherently flawed. I think they're trying to get over that. I think they know they have to get over that for the sake of their season, for the sake of themselves, and they'll all be better off if they can put this together for a long playoff run. But adversity is going to come at times. They're going to lose games here to go in this regular season. They have some tough road games still coming up. They're not going to win them all. They're going to lose some games in the playoffs, and it's how they respond that will show you whether they've really gotten over the hump or whether, this was just, something that everything felt good because Gordon Hayward hit a shot and you beat the defending champions by 33 points.
Yeah, we just don't know, quite frankly. We're not behind the scenes enough to know whether something is a perpetual problem or if it's, mountain being made out of a molehill. Like, I have 3 little kids. I recognize, the Celtics in many ways, some of the comments, some of the mood swings, they behave like children in the way that your son will lose a board game against you and say, well, the whole day's ruined. It's that kind of type of thing, sort of going back to the whole hasn't been fun for a long time, even though those comments came right after a stretch where they had won 10 out of 11 games. You don't know. Yeah. I mean, maybe they were winning and really weren't having fun, and then you have a much larger problem, or it was magnified. But again, we're not behind the scenes enough to know. But you mentioned Gordon Hayward a couple of times in there. He was terrible the first handful of games after the break. Maybe that was the ankle injury that he suffered in the workout with Shemi Ojale. Maybe he just wasn't good. Either way, 30 against the Warriors, winning jumper against the Kings. Brad Stevens loves what he's seen.
He should have plenty of confidence. He's a heck of a player, and we all believe in him. So, I'll probably stop talking about working his way back and just call him Gordon and try to, help move forward here, because he's obviously played great these two nights.
Well, in the Celts 19-2 when Hayward shoots at least 50%, and I think that's a very revealing number, especially because he sometimes takes a dozen shots, other times maybe not as frequently as other people would like. That's as we talk right now, so I don't know what he did against the Lakers, but he's the X factor in the playoffs. I think most people agree on that, and confidence is very important. Arguably for him, it's more important than anything else. He told Jackie McMullen recently that confidence has really come and gone this year. He's had to talk to somebody about kind of getting his head right. And he also said this just the other day about the mental and physical aspects of the recovery.
For sure, mental probably has been tougher. I think physically I've been feeling pretty good for a little while, but mentally it's been a challenge.
So, Scott, we talk all about consistency with the team. How about for Gordon Hayward specifically? What will it take to sustain what he has been doing in these recent games and be that guy more regularly to, as Stevens put it, just be Gordon?
I think what has to happen with Gordon, and I think you've seen it with some of these bigger games, is he is at his best when, he is involved, and that's an obvious thing to say, but one of the issues that I noticed at the beginning of the year was he's probably never been a guy who's been a spot-up guy in the corner. And this came about with Kevin Love a lot when he first went to the Cleveland Cavaliers. In that situation, you're all playing off LeBron. And maybe you could argue that one of the Celtics, sometimes they're at their best when they're playing off Kyrie Irving, or sometimes they do. And Terry Rozier actually said this after a game, I know it was more than a month ago, so maybe a month and a half ago. Kyrie Irving is the show, and when he's not out there, we're sharing the ball, and you don't know who's going to score, and the ball's touching other people's hands, and he wasn't necessarily, it came across as being a negative thing, but he wasn't saying it negatively. He was like, if you were on the court with that type of offensive talent, you would just watch him sometimes too, because he can do things that other people can't do. So to bring it back to Gordon Hayward, and part of this is on Brad, I think too, but putting him into position where he's affecting the offense. And you saw this during the Sacramento game a little bit, and even during the Golden State game. Putting the ball in his hands to push it up the floor, the game-winning play, it was obvious what they were doing. Like, whoever got loose on that inbounds play, whether it was going to be Terry Rozier or Gordon Hayward, was basically going to push the pace, get a Kings defender on his heel, and try to make a shot. It could have been Rozier. Jaylen Brown gave it to Gordon Hayward, which was probably a good sign there. And Gordon Hayward made the shot. And I think that's part of it's a mental hurdle. I mean, he's got to deal with it just like Terry Rozier has to deal with, coming off the bench and playing 15 minutes instead of 30. And Jaylen Brown has to deal with being told to be defense first some night and not getting 15 shots. And Gordon Hayward, in this team, he's not going to be the focal point of the offense like he was with the Utah Jazz for all those years. But also, in order to get the best out of him, you're going to have to run the offense through him a little bit and have him touch the ball on different possessions, and not, have so many isolation plays where he's in the corner and maybe the ball sees him every 3 possessions. And if he's only playing 20, 25 minutes a night, that's only 6 or 7 shots a night, and he can't really get into his rhythm. I think you had that stat, that you just gave there, but there's another one that I saw the other day where basically if he takes 10 or more shots, the Celtics have a very similar record to that. And the stats are probably tied into all the same games, I would imagine. But, I think he has to get himself involved, and the Celtics got to get him involved more regularly. It doesn't necessarily mean taking a ton of shots, but, having the ball in different people's hands. And one of the things I've noticed a little bit during the Golden State game and some of their other games is, and you saw it last year when it worked a little bit, is playing Kyrie Irving off the ball a little bit more and having the ball in either Terry Rozier's hands or Gordon Hayward's hands to initiate the offense, and maybe Kyrie gets a better shot off of that. I think that'll be the key to it. So, again, with just like anything else with Gordon Hayward, things have looked good at times, and you think that you're turning the corner with a guy like that, and then he has a couple of bad games and he goes into a funk where he only takes 1 or 2 shots for 2 weeks, and you start to think of this guy as a lost cause. I don't think of him as a lost cause. I think he's a talented guy. He does, Brad Stevens will talk a lot about a lot of the little things he does, and he makes the right basketball play, but then in his mind, I think it's, that same battle. Well, yeah, I know that's the play that I was supposed to make, but, then I only scored 4 points, and people want to know why I only scored 4 points. I think you need to get him involved in the offense, and you need him to be a facilitator and a playmaker. And you have a few guys like that. Terry Rozier has to be like that. Kyrie Irving has to be like that. You know, not everybody can be the playmaker on every play, but it goes back into the more hands that a ball touches during a possession, the less isolation, unless maybe you're coming down the last couple of minutes of the game. I think the better for everybody involved. And then, you know, that leads to winning. And then even if, you know, it is your night to score 7 points instead of 17 points, you felt like you were involved. You felt like you were contributing. You weren't just the guy who was, you know, standing in the corner that Terry Rozier looked at briefly and then decided to take the three-pointer himself. I think that creates more confidence in Gordon Hayward. And, you know, to go back to our other topic, that's the type of thing that creates that team bond, that team chemistry, cohesion on the court.
Final break to tell you today's show is brought to you by The Athletic. If you haven't heard about The Athletic by now, you got to be living under a rock. These guys have been crushing every element of sports coverage imaginable. Whether you're looking for specific local coverage with beat guys, sports discussed under a national lens, or anything in between, you got to make sure you take a look at The Athletic. No pop-ups, no ads, just high-quality content waiting behind every single click. Jay King, Jared Weiss, a couple of our friends of this podcast, some of the most knowledgeable guys who cover the Celtics, they write for The Athletic. So do Shams Charania, Sam Amick, Frank Isola, bunch of other great NBA and college basketball writers. You can't get content like this anywhere else. 600, 750 new articles every single week. Who else is putting out quality content like that? If you haven't signed up, take advantage of this deal because it's not going to last forever. Go to theathletic.com/CelticsBeat. Get 40% off your monthly subscription. That's a subscription for less than $3 a month just by going to theathletic.com/CelticsBeat. Shams, Amick, King, Weiss, all less than $3 a month. Sign yourself up. Go to theathletic.com/CelticsBeat. Back to Scott. A couple of guys that I want to talk about. We don't really have time to do it, but I do want to at least acknowledge them and how well they've played lately. Jaylen Brown, especially recently defensively, he has been just tremendous, winning all of his matchups in dominant fashion, and his good play, his consistent play, has really gone back a couple of months now. Al Horford had a little bit of a down stretch, at least shooting the ball, was not pretty for a little while, but his last handful of games, he's making virtually every single shot, and we know how vital this guy is. He's starting to look more like playoff Al, and all of that. The key objective, obviously, for him is to keep him in the flow of the offense like a Gordon Hayward. But someone that I do want to focus in on just a little bit here, Marcus Smart, because, I mean, he's had a career year, whether that's defensively and continues to believe, and I believe, and he should be, I think it's just fact, that he should be part of the all-defensive team. Shooting the ball as well, he's become a consistent three-point presence, and from the field in general. I mean, over 40% from the field, 36% from three. He's been very, very good. He's been a much improved, above-average playmaker. He's really, we've talked about this before. You and I have talked about this before. Never mind how much I've done it on the show. He's a heart and soul guy, grit and balls of this Celtics team, and any Celtics team he's been part of, and he just, in the last few days, turned 25 years old, which is kind of wild considering he's the longest tenured member of the Celtics. Is he someone, I don't like to generally throw around like the whole untouchable, indispensable type of tag because, you know, he's not the best player on the team. He's not, you know, the best player in the NBA or any of that stuff. But is Smart just one of those guys that really feels indispensable to you, that you, to win a championship, you know, you got to have that guy. Is he that guy for this team?
You know, it's so amusing. I think the Marcus Smart standing with the way that he is perceived on this team, I think says a lot about this team this year. He was easily, over the last couple of years, the most polarizing guy on the team. He would drive certain people nuts, and then certain people, I think the more you watch the Celtics, the more you loved Marcus Smart. But a lot of other people, whether it be his shooting and, you know, some of the plays he would make, would just kind of pull their hair out. I think everybody universally agrees, with the exception of maybe Al Horford. But for the most part, Marcus Smart has been the guy you've liked on the Celtics start to finish this season more than anybody else. He's the guy that when things aren't going well, he's still diving on the floor and it's taking the ball away from people. You know, he still has his boneheaded plays from here and there, but you never question the effort of Marcus Smart. You never question the intensity of Marcus Smart. You never question the his mentality going into a different game. He's generally said most of the right things after some of these games. He's gotten on guys when they deserve it about effort without pointing fingers. And I know he's had a couple things where he's kind of jumped, you know, on the court. He's kind of jumped at guys a little bit. And I think part of that is him trying to, you know, find his way in the leadership role, kind of being that bridge guy between, you know, quote unquote, the young guys and the veterans. But I think you've seen this year why through all the criticisms and even all the questions that Danny Ainge and Brad Stevens would get about Marcus Smart over the last couple of years, why he was such a priority for them to bring back. Because when you have a guy like that, it allows you to a little bit more wiggle room when you have a guy like maybe Kyrie Irving or Jason Tatum, who's maybe more of an offensive player. Marcus Smart is kind of that glue guy that brings everything together. And I think you're right. If they are able to go on a title push with this team or whatever version of this team they have going forward, assuming that Marcus Smart is a part of it, I think he'll be a very big key to anything anything strong that they accomplish. There's people have to remember that Marcus Smart was the first guy that Brad Stevens drafted. Mm-hmm. He was picked as coach after they had taken Kelly Olynyk. He was a guy, and I remember talking to you about this, way back when he was first coming out of Oklahoma State, that, you kind of had a feeling after, as much as they tried to play close to the vest, you kind of had a feeling coming out of those workouts that there was something about Marcus Smart that Brad Stevens was really buying into. Anybody who was at that workout was not surprised when the Celtics took him sixth that year. And through all the ups and downs that I think he's had through a public perception over the last few years within the organization, they've been pretty consistent on what they believe that Marcus Smart brings to the team, the locker room, and any championship aspirations that they have.
And I said going into last season that this is the year that he's going to shoot 36% from three-point range. And that specific number, 36%. And if the guy hadn't freaking punched a picture frame and otherwise hurt his hand with the injury, I might have been right. I was a year off. I'm going to have to swallow that one. That's okay.
He had kind of a hand injury lingering, and obviously the picture frame was an unfortunate situation. And, he's had those things throughout his career, which have kind of been, black marks or whatever. But, he had kind of dealt with wrist hand injuries throughout all of last year. And Brad Stevens has talked a little bit about that, he thought he was ready for this type of year last year. Remember Skinny Marcus?
Yep.
Came back.
Oh, yeah.
We all forgot about Skinny Marcus, but Skinny Marcus was a thing for a while.
Well, a snow day workout Marcus, all that, burying all the threes.
Marcus, that was a big one, too, and he just wasn't able to do it consistently. I think he stayed pretty healthy this year. There was the thing with his mom last year. I think that in the free agency, I think that weighed on him a lot more in retrospect than we realized at the time. His mother was diagnosed with cancer during the year, and she passed away this past year. So, that was weighing on him. The free agency thing was obviously weighing on him, and I think you have to take that in consideration a little bit when you're looking at guys like Terry Rozier this year. That is a thing coming up. If in terms of whether you're going to be signing a contract for $13 million a year in the summer or the $6 million qualifying offer, that's a big swing in lifestyle and in your long-term future. He looks comfortable this year. He was happy ultimately with the way the contract worked out, and he looks more comfortable in his Celtic skin, so to speak, I think, than anybody has all year, and that's shown through with his consistent play.
Yeah, and a terrible rap song. Now, before we do rap, I saved this for the speaking of rap. I saved this one for the end here because it's inevitably at some point going to be a story if things like this persist, but right now it's just kind of fun fodder. Fans and media have been so obsessed with the idea of the Celtics pursuing Anthony Davis in a trade this offseason, where at certain points during this year, Scott, a lot of people just said, screw it, this team isn't going to do anything, let's just get to the offseason and see what they do and make next year all that much more interesting. And, of course, the impact on Kyrie Irving in July 1 and what happens, whether Irving wants to team up with Kevin Durant in New York and everything. But what if Durant lands in Boston? That's something Brian Windhorst floated on the jump.
It's not impossible for the Celtics to get their hands on Kevin Durant this offseason. They have the assets to trade for Anthony Davis. Kevin Durant he can be signed and traded. There's no, they could work out a deal. Remember, the team that finished in second place when he signed with the Warriors was Boston. So when people look at Kyrie and KD, I think they automatically assume it's just going to be New York. There's other teams out there that can do it.
I get where Windhorst is coming from in that, yes, the C's have the assets to work a sign and trade for KD, but removing just the fact that it's possible, is it even remotely realistic?
I guess you wouldn't put anything past what could happen this summer, but and that's what makes the NBA what it is. The fact that the NBA is, on July 1st, you're talking about basketball, and that's something that has changed so much over the last couple of years. The NBA has made itself a 12-month sport like the NFL has. Baseball could certainly take some lessons with the way that some of these other sports have kind of cultivated into the off-season machine. But, when it comes to Kevin Durant, these guys, it goes back to some of the stuff we said before about Kyrie Irving. Like, these guys do have, and they should to a certain extent, they have control over where they want to play. So, yeah, the Celtics do have the assets if they want to trade for a Kevin Durant, but Kevin Durant's going to have to want to come to Boston.
Right.
And maybe, maybe that's what he was actually saying to Kyrie Irving when it looked like they were saying 2 max deals or 2 max contracts in that hallway in New York that supposedly nobody was ever supposed to bring up to Kyrie ever again. But I think with everything that happens this summer, whether it be Kevin Durant or Anthony Davis or especially Kyrie Irving, I think it all starts with the Celtics getting a true sense of what Kyrie Irving wants to do in June, and whether he's invested in being here, whether he's going to sign that max contract, assuming that they're going to offer it to him. And then if they get a reasonable commitment, I know he can't commit until July 1st, but if they get a reasonable commitment that this is going to happen, then they can look in a direction of trading for Anthony Davis or, maybe even pulling off this Kevin Durant scenario. But if they feel that there's uncertainty with him, or if they feel that ultimately he's not going to be back, then I think you have to be really hesitant about moving on from that, Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown, Marcus Smart, Terry Rozier core that, you might still be able to do something with if you don't have Kyrie Irving. So, to say it all comes back to Kyrie is it may seem too simplistic, but I think that's what it is. And I think you won't know that in a lot of respects. You may have a sense of it, and they may have a sense of it, and they may still feel pretty confident about it, but you won't know that. I'll finish with this until June, because one of the things that's amused me so much during this Kyrie Irving conversation is, what will it take to keep him? And a lot of people say, well, you got to trade for Anthony Davis. Well, they're probably going to have to know what Kyrie is doing before they make a trade for Anthony Davis. Like the Kyrie domino, I think, has to fall first there, because Anthony Davis isn't going to want to be traded. I mean, they can trade for him, but it only makes sense if Kyrie's going to stay.
Mm-hmm.
But the idea of, well, if they get knocked out in the first round, he's definitely gone. But if they make it to the finals, you'll be able to convince him to stay because of what happened in the playoffs. When he asked out of Cleveland, they had just been to the finals. He had just hit a game-winning shot to win a championship the year before. So I think with Kyrie, even the idea of, I don't think it's going to come. I don't think him in his mind is going to say, well, if we had lost to the Bucks in Game 7 of the conference semifinals, I was out of here, but we made it to Game 6 of the conference finals against the Raptors, so I'm all in for the next 5 years and $190 million.
Right.
I think it's going to be more than that, and it's going to be somewhat related to that, but I think it's going to be a lot more, and about how he's feeling and how comfortable he is with his future here, and it's going to take that to work itself out before you can decide whether you're pressing forward in an Anthony Davis, Kevin Durant scenario, or whether, you don't want to give up the 2 number 3 picks over the last couple of years. And you got that Memphis pick coming, and, it looks like the Sacramento pick is going to be a lottery pick this year after all now, whether you move forward in that direction. So pretty much to end this the way we started it, it all comes down to Kyrie.
Scott Souza, it's good to have you on Celtics Beat. It's good to have you back on the Celtics Beat, and, of course, to have you with us at CLNS. Really appreciate it.
Thank you very much, Adam, and look forward to listening to the podcast and being on kind of the same team here for a while.
Great to have Scott on. As you can tell, knowledgeable guy. So, yeah, we're happy to have him with us at CLNS. All right, it's been a long show, though, so we're going to go. Today's program brought to you by Robinhood. Robinhood is giving listeners of Celtics Beat, the podcast, of course, a free stock like Apple, Ford, Sprint to help you build your portfolio. So sign up at Celtics.Robinhood.com. Show is also brought to you by Mint Mobile. Get your new wireless plan and a new SIM card shipped to you for free, just $15 at mintmobile.com/podcast. And lastly, we're brought to you by The Athletic. Get 40% off your monthly subscription just by going to theathletic.com/CelticsBeat. Thanks to Scott. Thanks to my producer, Evan. Thanks to Nick, Larry, John, everybody else. Most of all, as I always say, you. Without you, these shows aren't possible. So keep finding us, be it on my Twitter, at Adam M. Kaufman, or on
a lot more, and about how he's feeling and how comfortable he is with his future here. And it's going to take that to work itself out before you can decide whether you're pressing forward in an Anthony Davis, Kevin Durant scenario, or whether, you don't want to give up the 2 number 3 picks over the last couple of years. And you got that Memphis pick coming, and, it looks like the Sacramento pick is going to be a lottery pick this year after all now, whether you move forward in that direction. So, pretty much to end this the way we started it, it all comes down to Kyrie.
Scott Souza, it's good to have you on Celtics Beat. It's good to have you back on the Celtics Beat, and, of course, to have you with us at CLNS. Really appreciate it.
Thank you very much, Adam, and look forward to listening to the podcast and being on kind of the same team here for a while.
Great to have Scott on. As you can tell, knowledgeable guy. So, yeah, we're happy to have him with us at CLNS. All right, it's been a long show, though, so we're going to go. Today's program brought to you by Robinhood. Robinhood is giving listeners of Celtics Beat, the podcast, of course, a free stock like Apple, Ford, Sprint to help you build your portfolio. So sign up at Celtics.Robinhood.com. Show is also brought to you by Mint Mobile. Get your new wireless plan and a new SIM card shipped to you for free, just $15 at